Let's wait for people to join a bit.
Okay. I hope you don't ask top questions.
No, nothing tough here. There's nothing you can't answer.
Okay.
Mm.
I've done this many times without number, really, I should say, but each time I quite a little bit of apprehension.
Apprehension. No.
It's almost natural. In Kapara, kuma then you get relaxed.
You're used to it.
Kamar shiga class ne. Ko shekara nawa kai kana shiga. Especially if it is new class. In ka shiga, you get a little bit not agitated, a little bit anxious there, because you don't know what you are going to get into. But once kapara sai kuma kaga komai ya tafi.
Mashallah, that's nice.
Thank you.
All right, then. Let me start with the intro.
Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Sadiya, a monthly live show organized by Poetic Wednesdays. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Mr. Ismail Bala, a poet, critic, translator, and academic whose work and mentorship has many emerging poets in Africa today. He was born and educated in Kano, and he completed his postgraduate studies at Oxford. He's a fellow of the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa. His poems have been translated into multiple languages, and he has many poetry collections published, the first of which is Line of Sight, published 2020 by Praxis, and more recently we have Memory of Departure, published by Masobe 2026. So thank you so much for honoring our invitation, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So we hope you're well, and how has your year been so far?
Well, slow and steady, not as expected, but well, thank God we are thriving. Yes.
Alhamdulillah. All right, so you have decades of experience in this literature space, but then everyone starts somewhere, and we would like to know, when and how did you find poetry?
I would say that in secondary school, I had the misfortune of being in science class. Not because I was exceptionally good at sciences, but because my friends were in science class, so I had to also force myself to transfer to science class. But it was so boring. I didn't know that I will ever comprehend mathematics, not because I could not, but because the teachers, as we all know, were boring. So a friend of mine, I had the fortune of a friend of mine whose mother was a principal, and they had access to books, and he gifted me an anthology, West African Bath, I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of such anthologies. And from there, even while in secondary school, I started scribbling dojels. For university, I did IJMB. I didn't do English, but in the university, I was in mass communication and English, and that was where I honestly started writing poetry. So I could say that's where I started.
Mashallah, that's nice. So you left science and you didn't really like that. Went for literature. Okay, so what are the kind of, you mentioned one book already now, but what other books and authors shaped you the most?
I started reading early. I remember that I had access to books, not much. I grew up with my grandparents. They didn't go to school, but I had access to books in the sense that I was given enough to buy the kind of books that I wanted. And one such kind of literature that was readily available was Hausa literature. So all those Hausa classics were available, and I had them. So I was reading them. Toward the end of his life, my grandfather was bedridden for many years. So one of the pastime was me reading Magana Jariche to him in the night, together with my cousins and brothers
Wow.
we grew up with. So I would say that Hausa classics, those novels from the 1930s,
Mm.
were the first set of books that really shaped my imagination. And if today I am any son like a writer, I think it's thanks to those books that I have grappled with in the beginning.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear that they were Hausa books. Is that why you also write in Hausa?
Probably, probably my writing in Hausa probably is a bit of a stretch. I've written a few short stories. I've
Mm.
translated mostly poetry from Hausa to English. I'm not into fiction writing or criticism. That's the
Mm.
writing I do. So probably I should be somewhere in the margins
In between. Yeah. And
between.
it's interesting, the work of translation, because there are words that you can't directly translate and some emotions that you can't properly convey in another language. How do you navigate that?
It's a tricky terrain. You have an enormous body of literature about how to go about translation, especially for beginners,
Mm.
translators. But basically, uh, no matter what you have read, no matter whom you talk to, as far as translation is concerned, we are all have to paddle our canoes alone. It's a bit of a trial and error. You will have to find a method that works best for you. There
Mm.
isn't one size fit all for different kind of translation for different translators. So for me, the basic thing is to master the two languages that you are working at.
Mm.
It's not enough, for instance, to just be a native Hausa speaker. I'm not a native English speaker, but I'm a native Hausa speaker. Even at that, there are a lot of challenges. But you can come across words that are either extinct or they are not prevalent here in Kano. Maybe they
Mm.
belong to the Sokoto, Hausa, or other dialects. So you will have to find a way that works for you. It's especially trickier when it comes to poetry. Maybe when it comes to technical translation, everything is
So,
straightforward. But for
mm.
literary translation, you will have to triple or quadruple your effort. You will have to.
Mm.
And another thing is that, again, it's not just enough to be a Hausa speaker. But if
Mm.
you are translating poetry, especially for me, it's an added advantage if you also happen to be a practicing poet in one of
Mm.
the languages. Like I
Mm.
write for in English, so it's a bit easier if I'm translating poetry from Hausa to English.
Mm.
Unless, of course, if the translation is for a different purpose other than literary. For example, historians, anthropologists, most of the time they do a lot of translation of literary works, but not for literary purpose, but for academic research purpose. And in
Yeah.
such context, they do not care about the literary qualities. They are all
Language. Mm.
after fidelity, after direct translation. So in such a
Mm.
situation, one does not have to bother about getting translation right. As far as they get what they want for their research purposes, it's fine. But for
Yes.
literary purposes, if you are translating a poem from Hausa to English or vice versa, what you have translated has to also be a poem in that language, even though it's originally a translation, say from Hausa or to English or English to Hausa. But the
Mm.
end product has to aspire to some kind of literary excellence, all right? Has to be in a way similar, all right, or aspire to be similar to poetry in that language. If it is from Hausa to English, then it has to aspire to be some kind of poem
Go
as we
on.
expect it to be in English. Likewise, if
Mm.
it is in Hausa. So it's
Mm.
a lot messier and trickier.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
Hmm.
O- Over the years, you've like worn many hats. We know you as a poet, a mentor, an academic, a critic, and even a translator. So, which identity feels the most familiar for you right now?
Uh, with some reluctance, I will say it's poetry. The great
Mm,
American poet Elizabeth Bishop said, "Poetry or poet, to call yourself poet is not appropriation." That she was ashamed, a bit ashamed to be called a poet. I would say the same too, but here we are. It's a toga that I had to wear for many years, and it's what I have been known for.
mm.
So I would say reluctantly poetry. Mm.
Poet. Oh, that's beautiful. I came across an article of yours like when I was preparing for this interview. I think you
Mm.
wrote it for Art Muse Fair. And you
Mm.
were talking about how reading a poem is a journey, how our taste is linked to our personalities, and we don't have to, if we truly want to understand poems, we don't have to rush them. And
Mm.
before this, I was reading Memory of Departure, and I was like going really fast because I wanted to read a lot. And after that, I was like, okay, I need to calm down. So, what inspired you to write that article? Was it because people have difficulties understanding your work?
Yes and no. I remember the article had its origin from a talk I gave some years back
Hmm.
for the Association of Nigerian Authors, Kano State Branch. I think it was as in celebration of Poetry Day or something like that. Um, it was a talk, and then later on, I developed it into a paper, which was
Yeah.
eventually published. Poetry is a journey. There is a book with similar title. I can't remember um, the the writer, but
Oh,
this is a woman poet from Britain
okay.
who argued recently that we all have a different way into poetry, depending on our personality, depending on our background,
Mm,
because we come to literature generally with our own prejudices, with our own personality, with our own worldview, with our
mm,
own understanding, with our own background, with our own cultural baggage, and we try to find ourselves in what we read.
mm,
Um, Part of the reason why I argued that it was a journey is because, like we say in Hausa, I don't know whether if I say it in English it will make sense, that before you embark on the journey, the traveler is in control of the journey. But once he
mm.
has embarked upon the travel, the journey, it's like the journey now is in control. You can say that I'm going to Kaduna or Abuja, but once you set out, basically what it means is that you are not in control. You are not in control of what will happen, the
Same.
dynamics, what you
Yeah.
will encounter, plus what you plan to do, plus what will eventually happen. So a
Happen.
similar analogy could be applied to poetry in a way, in the sense that most people think they could plunge into poetry and
Mm,
instantly get out of it, get out of what is often called meaning. Readers
mm.
are always looking for, we are win on this idea of that a poem must have meaning.
Meaning.
If you read a poem and you do not get find your way through the matrix of the poem, you think that either it's not a good poem or poetry is supposed to be difficult. But what I have been trying to argue, and many other scholars and critics have argued in the same uh, line, is that sometimes a poem, like most literary works, takes a long time to reveal themselves to us. And meaning, it's desirable, philosophically speaking, but it's not always given. And it's not always something that we should worry about ourselves about.
Mm,
You could enjoy poetry, you could enjoy the words, you could enjoy the music, you could enjoy the reason, you could enjoy
yeah.
the metaphor, but taking the poem as a whole, most of the time, um, that poem resists any attempt to impose meaning. So,
Mm,
what I'm saying is that most of the time, when we think we have found meaning in literary works, the meaning is not immanent in, is not contained in the work that
Poem
we have,
itself.
but it's we that are trying to impose our own understanding on the literary text, and that's what we call meaning. If we can stop to ponder, to enjoy the word, to enjoy the music, probably it would be better than this attempt that we must find meaning. And lastly, like film, if anybody is familiar with film, for film aficionados, you can watch the same film over and over and over again. And each time you watch it, it's like it presents itself anew. It's like that's something you have missed from the previous viewing, and now you are seeing it for the first time. And most of the time, for me at least, and many film critics and film aficionados have said the same thing. It's many years afterwards that they got to understand what the film is about. It's maybe in the first instances they have watched it, it's just a jungle of montage, pictures, reels, voices. But later on, they were able to fuse everything together, and it makes eventually it makes sense to them.
Now I'm interested in knowing if there's any body of work, whether poem or film, that you didn't understand in the beginning and then later on, years down the line, you got the meaning.
Um, I would say two. One, the poetry of Wole Soyinka. From that
Okay.
anthology, I told you that my friend gifted me while I was in secondary school. And from my reading prior to studying English, Wole Soyinka is supposed to be the most difficult poet in the world. His poetry is impregnable. It's so complex. It's so advanced that you'll just be wasting your time trying to read it. And I came to Wole Soyinka's poetry with that mindset, and I couldn't find my way. It was many, many years when I became an academic that I understood Wole Soyinka's poetry. And it was not because I was an academic, it's because I matured as a reader. I stopped looking for meaning. I stopped taking people's word for it and trying to find out Wole Soyinka's writing for myself. The second instance is Chinua Achebe's novel that I read, I think, while I was in secondary school, Until of the Savannah. You could imagine a secondary school student reading such a advanced work of fiction by a master novelist with my limited vocabulary and limited experience as a reader of literary fiction. I couldn't understand anything. I couldn't make any sense out of it. But later on, when I read other works by Achebe, and I was matured as a reader, that I got to understand Until of the Savannah better than when I read it.
All right. That's beautiful. And I'm glad, like, people like you are even saying Wole Soyinka's work is very difficult to understand. So, right. So, in your opinion, what makes a poem? What makes a poem good? What makes a poem brilliant?
this, this is a trick question. I warn you about not asking difficult questions at the beginning, but here we are. Well, this is a very subjective question. I have been asked this many times, and many great poets were asked, and there is no uniform answer or uniform opinion about this. Even something that is very subjective. I will say there is. I will start by saying what many poets have said. Um, Wordsworth about experience, poetry being experience. Mariam Monroe about poetry being something like a lump in your throat. When you read a good poem, it's like there is some lump in your throat. But for me, I would say any poem that stays memorable, that you can remember, either with nostalgia, with sadness, with whatever feeling, if it's stuck to your mind for whatever reason, I would say that that poem has succeeded in becoming a good poem. But it depends on the person. It depends on the context. It's like music. They said when you are sad, you enjoy the
Sad.
lyrics, and when you are happy, you enjoy the beat, you enjoy the music. So it's something like this. It's something like this. It's context bound. Uh, Maybe if you love a particular poet, perhaps you could feel that you love all his work, or there is a particular piece of his writing, or particular piece of his writing, or particular book of his writing, or particular period of that writer's life that you particularly like. And because you like that particular piece or poem, you think you like that poet.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's the same with other people, but for me, it's the memorability of a poem, whether it's stuck to my mind, whether I can remember a phrase or two, or a line, or an idea from that poem. For me, that is the success of a poem. But even the most successful poem for one person may turn out to be the most horrible poem for another person.
Person.
That's why you could send in your poem to a magazine or a journal. They will be readily turned down by one journal, but they will be at the same breath accepted by another journal. That's and it's also about tests, about literary tests, about the kind of writing, about the kind of poetry that you are win on, you grew up with. It's similar to what is happening to literary and popular fiction. People who are used to reading popular fiction, once they switch to literary fiction, they find the switch very difficult. Even yesterday on Facebook, I saw a
Yeah.
post by someone, can't remember whom. I think he's not my friend. It's those random posts pushed
Page.
by the algorithm, ranting about Chioma, uh, Chigozie Obioma's The Fisherman, that he sat on, he was able to finish the book, that the book contains so many difficult words. It was basically ranting about the
Yeah.
difficulty, the torture he went through. But it's
Torture.
exactly what I'm saying, that maybe because this person has never
Tried
read
something like that.
read literary fiction before, and now he's trying his hand at literary fiction, and he is finding the switch very difficult. Is there something? If you are in on a particular type of poetry, once you switch to another type of poetry, it's difficult. Many people find American poetry too simplistic. It's too, there's a difference between simple and simplistic. So some people find it too simplistic. It's they say it's just conversational. It doesn't read like poetry because they are win on an idea of poetry being difficult, or being formal, or being metric, or being whatever. So once they encounter other poetries that are not steep in those features that they are used to, then they think that poetry is not good,
Good.
it's boring, and stuff like that.
Thank you for that answer. It was very enlightening. And if you think about memorability, what's the first poem that jumps to you right now?
Carol Ann Duffy's um, Time. Yeah, I maybe because I wrote my postgraduate dissertation on Carol Ann Duffy. She was a British poet laureate. She was very popular. You know, it's very difficult to find poets who are popular and critically acclaimed. So
Yeah.
she combines these two. She's very popular. Her books are staple of GCSE, the exam in Britain. Uh, she's one of the most anthologized poets in Britain, and she's one of the most acclaimed poet in Britain, in the United Kingdom. So she she writes poetry that critics could loud about, could talk about, and also common readers, common people could read and enjoy, which you cannot find the same with many poets.
Right. Yeah.
So her poems sort of stick to my mind. Yes, I'm
Mm,
very poor about memorizing the whole poem, but once I'm
yeah.
asked about a poet that I'm likely to remember lines or a whole chunk from their
Mm,
poetry, I mention Carol Andapi. Mm.
that's nice. A little line. Can we get a little line from the
Yeah,
poem?
sure. Oh,
Thank
from
you.
the poem?
Yeah.
I can't. I will have to.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
We'll
I
come
can't.
to your.
I can't.
Yeah.
I'm very poor memorizer.
Okay. All right. Now coming to your books.
Mm.
You started, if you revisit your first collection, Line of Sight, it was written 6 years ago. Do you
Mm.
still recognize that poet or have you changed so much?
Significantly.
Mm,
If after so many years you haven't changed as a writer, then probably you are not doing something
right.
right. Because I loved when I reread. I don't like revisiting my poems really. It's
Oh.
like going over your primary or secondary school assignment or essays. You laugh at
Mm,
yourself, the naivety. Um, if I'm to rewrite some of the poems, or if I'm to say reissue the book, I will have to probably cut so many poems out or rewrite a whole chunk.
mm,
Um, the book was published in 2022, but it's showing that it was published in 2021. For whatever
okay.
reason, I don't know why the publishers changed the date.
Yeah, that's it.
Um, Nearly all the poems were written while I was in the US as a fellow of the International Writers Program at the
Program.
University of Iowa. So they were written in a particular time for a particular
Mm,
context.
mm,
The environment where I happened to find myself, the writers I had made, the program I attended, the universities I gave reading, and this cultural immersion in a totally different environment must have, in one way or another, influenced how the poem were conceived and eventually written. So they were a product of their time. If I'm
mm,
to rewrite or to write on the theme that I have written in those poems, I would, with hindsight, I would write them differently.
mm. Well, that is growth, as they say, and as you mentioned.
Mhm.
I'm very interested in how you pick your titles for all the four collections that have been published so far.
Ah, we
Mhm.
have we have the same problem with Nasiba, and from my cycle of friends, many writers have the same problem with picking their title.
Titles.
I don't write with a particular title in mind. Most of the
Mhm.
time, I it's after I finish a poem or a book that the question of title and titling will come about. Line of sight was given by my editor at that time.
Okay.
It
Mm,
was not. It was not the. It was not um, the title I had in mind.
yeah.
I wanted to borrow an idea from the Canadian poet Michael Ondaatje,
Mm,
who has influenced me. I wanted to borrow something plight, something about plight, or something. There's a poem about plight in the book,
mm,
so I wanted to um, also title the book along that particular poem, but
mm, mm,
my my publisher, my editor, then suggested this title. For my chapbook, I was the one who um, chose the
Six.
title. Yeah,
Yeah.
and what I did was there was a poem from the book called "A Span of Something," so
Mm,
I chose it as the title of the book. For my third collection, Ivory Night, I think it was Umar Sidi and Richard Ali, my editors, who chose Ivory Night. What I chose, they thought it was too um, blunt, it was not poetic, it was not catchy. So we
okay.
settled for Ivory Night. For my letters book, Memory of Departure,
Mm,
um, I also arbitrarily chose the title from a poem of the same name, which
okay.
it was only after the book was published that I realized there was a novel by the Tanzanian Nobel laureate. that has a book with the same title.
Wow.
Right, Abdulrazak Gurna has a
Yeah.
novel also called Memory of Departure. It was
Ah.
after the book was
Okay.
published that I realized that
Mm.
a line of sight after my book was published, the great Nigerian novelist Abubakar Adam Ibrahim also has his column name Line of Sight. He has a column in Daily Trust newspaper. It was
Line
after
of
my book has been published that he now chose Line of Sight as the title of his newspaper column.
okay.
But generally, what I normally do is that I just settle for praise or award from a
Mhm.
poem, use it as a title. Sometimes, not always, maybe the idea of the poem, I will get
Mhm.
award, not necessarily, or a praise, not necessarily from the poem itself, but a, an award or a praise that encapsulates what I was trying to do uh, in that poem or in the book as well.
Mm.
If you look at Memory of Departure, it's a book that is steeped in memory and
Yeah.
steeped in the journey motif. The journey motif, hence the word departure and memory. So
Mm.
basically, what the poems are doing, they are engaging, they are memorials to a departure. So
Mm.
something like that in a way. So I may not always succeed, um, but well, here we are. This is there's a
Mm.
whole theory and whole debate about titles, about titling. So
Yeah.
I don't want to go into that, but this is how I usually title my
Yeah.
books.
And the titles are beautiful, especially this latest one, Memory of Departure. It's memorable.
Thank you.
So please, we would like for you to pick a poem from the
Mhm.
collection. Any poem, read
Okay.
it out for us. Yeah.
Okay. Incidentally, I open on page 33. It's
Mhm.
called Locket. Locket.
Okay.
Elizabeth screams a bit, then comes round to show me where something pricks her.
Mhm.
Ensconcing herself close to my face, she yanks her blouse out of her skirt. The little line of flesh, so silky, so purely supple, so real, that the whole load of my body goes solely empty and floats with desire. No sign of a bite. Elizabeth slips herself in and goes back to her work. Goes back to her work table to hammer again at the plates she's finishing for a locket, leaving me to pretend as though nothing has happened, as though this instant I'm looped in could go on playing like this forever with nothing affected. So
Mm.
this is
Thank you.
locket. If you have the book,
Mhm.
is from page 33 to 34.
Yeah. I read it as well when I was reading before this interview. So do you remember the inspiration behind it? Like,
I think I read. I like most writers. I have a very weird way of inspiring myself to write. I don't force
mhm.
myself to write creatively. I only force myself when there is money involved. If it's not creative writing, then I will have to find a way to motivate myself and write. There's no
Mm.
way. There's no two ways about that. But as far as creative writing, poetry is concerned, I do not force myself to write. I only write when I have to write, when the conditions are right. One of such condition is when I read other people's work, especially I read something that I really like.
Mhm.
Either um, I try to imagine what um, a poet could have said. It's like changing a point of view, that I
Yeah.
have read something about this, and then I will try to imagine the other
That's
way around of that thing. So
mm.
basically, reading other people's work is a good inspiration for me. So I think I read a Canadian poet. Can't remember. I'm getting old, so I'm finding it difficult to remember Canadian poet. I think that's when I wrote the poem.
Yes.
And I usually write longhand. Yes,
Mm.
even though I'm computer savvy, I I have this deluxe um,
Notebook.
notebooks. Yeah, I have so
Mm.
many of them. It's like I'm obsessed. I always carry one around in my bag. I
Mhm.
have them all over the house, on my table, in my bedroom, by my bedside, stack of books everywhere, small,
Mhm.
big ones, pocket size. So I normally scribble my poem in the notebook, and then I have to revise in the notebook, taking several pages, several drafts, and then when I am a bit satisfied with what I have written, I will type it up on my
Mhm.
computer, and then I print two copies. I always print two copies. I have a
Okay.
holder in my bag that I keep one, and then I keep another copy somewhere in my study, because I
Mm.
had the misfortune of losing a lot of my early poems, so I
Yeah.
recovered them
Mm.
precisely because of this idea of writing them down. I only recovered them. What I Before I started using notebooks, I usually write them on A4 paper or legal
Paper.
pads. And then
Mm.
when they accumulate, I have them bound. So those poems that I lost many years ago, I only recovered them because I had to go back to my bound notes and
Yeah.
retype them. So to guard
Mm.
against that misfortune, I always print two copies.
Two
Uh,
copies.
yes, and I also have
Mm.
the this stack of all the journals and
Notebooks.
notebooks.
Mm. That's a good thing. You mentioned how this collection is like a journey. So
Mm,
are the poems arranged in a way that this follows this? Like, is it very intentional, the arrangement of your poems?
yeah. Mm.
Mhm.
Um, Among all my books, I think only Line of Sight is not divided into section or parts.
Mhm.
This latest collection and the previous one, Ivory Night, I have what I call introit, like something like a pre-person, and then I have the main parts. So it's the same with
Mhm.
line of with the memory of departure. There's an introit, which is like an introduction, salt given, preface, forward. You can call it what you will, and then there is part one, two, three, and four. Part one
Mhm.
is basically a clutch of love poems, poems about relationship, about love,
Yeah.
about desire. Part two, short poems, mostly about nature and the environment. Part
Mhm.
three are also poems about nature, about the environment, about the effect on time, about memory. And then part four are mostly allegorical, philosophical poems. So
Poems.
I arrange them in the motif I said earlier, journey motif,
Yeah.
departure, adventure, return. Only that I've added one
Mhm.
other part which does not belong to that journey motif, because in the journey motif you only have three points: departure, adventure, return.
Mhm. Okay, that's beautiful.
Thank
To
you.
our listeners, if you have any questions regarding the book or any questions directed at him, please type them out before we end. Okay. So yeah, my next question is there any poem that you had to like take out of this collection or any of your collections?
There are so many of them. There are so
Mm.
many. There are so many of them. With memory of departure, it was not as acerbic as with the case of Ivory Night. I
Mm.
only took out poems um, uh, because of the number of pages, because of the length of the book. I didn't want the book to be unwieldy. Otherwise, I usually advise people to not go beyond 50 poems per collection. But I also
Mm.
broke my own rule.
Yeah.
It's not a rule really. It's not a
Yeah.
rule. This is informed by what I have seen with a lot of poets, especially in the West, in
Mm.
England and in the US, except for a collected poem or selected poem. you hardly ever see an individual collection going beyond 50 words,
50.
unless you are writing to a particular theme. In such a situation, you could extend the barrier of 50 poems barrier. Every night I was writing to a theme. All right, I was trying to restrict myself to a particular subject matter, and I don't want to go out of that subject matter. With memory of departure, it's a cornucopia, it's an amalgam, it's an assemblage of so many different themes, subject, and ideas. So, because of problem of length, pages, I had to um, excise some poems. Yeah, and sometimes you excise, you remove a poem from one collection, but later on, you can find that poem fits to a particular focus of another book, or you could send it out to a magazine. There are a number of poems with Ivory Night inadvertently. I don't know whether it was from my own part or from the part of my publisher. There were 3 or 4 poems that I particularly like, but somehow they were missing. And I didn't remember the editor saying that they should be removed because they do not fit in. I just cannot explain. It was only after the book was published and I was reading it and I was looking for those poems that I realized that the poem were missing. So among the 2 or 3 books that are hopefully going to publish before the end of the year or early next year, I had to sneak back those poems that were missing from Line of Sight. And with Ivory Night as well, 2 or 3 poems that I think I removed because I didn't feel they were up to the arc I was trying to achieve with the collection, but somehow they found their way into memory of departure. One of these books that I'm working on, which is called Night Keeper, is not a selected body of work, but I have few poems from Line of Sight and some of the poems that were written even before Line of Sight was published. I have a selection of those poems in the book, and I also have a selection of some of my translation from other languages to English in the book. So the book will come out before the end of the year or early next year.
All right, we're looking forward to that. And I know you cannot control the perception people have of your poems, of your work, but has there been any maybe review or criticism that made you really maybe look at your own work in a different way?
Yeah, there are criticism, but they have not changed the way that I write. Mostly it has to do with foreign influence. Some people think that I've been influenced badly or negatively, if I should use that expression, by the foreign poets that I admire, the poets that I taught as an academic. I wouldn't dispute. I will neither deny nor confirm that. But I think if we all write differently, we all write from different impulse. All right, from different shots of creativity. I always go back to what Toni Morrison said. She said, if there is any book that you would like to read but it's not available, perhaps you should write the book. So I do not do style. I do not do clans. I do not belong to a group of poets who think alike or who try to write alike, who have a particular creative goal, the same creative goal. I do not do not style passion part. I do not see poetry as a passion part, that if a particular group of writers are writing in a particular way, that I must compel myself to join in that poetic passion part. So I be maybe not conservative, a bit old fashioned in the sense that I write the way I think I should write, the way I set out to write. And I'm not swayed by what um,
Opinions.
say, yeah, because I
Mm,
believe this is the trajectory in which my poetic voice is going in that direction. Whether
mm,
or not that trajectory is fashionable in a particular time or not, I think it's a different matter.
mm. You're writing for yourself first.
Not
Mm,
for my, yeah, well, you could say that,
mhm,
which is not a political thing. It's not politically correct to say you are writing for yourself, but whether we like it or not, the first impetus to write is to write for ourselves because we are our
mm,
past readers.
mm.
We read what we write before anybody else. We may not be our only audience, we may not be our
Definitely.
own audience, but
Mm,
we are our first readers before any other person.
mhm. All right. Thank you for that answer. We have two questions, so I'll read them out for you. The first
Okay.
person, Sir Karofi Usman, is asking, should we expect a Hausa collection from you soon?
No,
We would love that.
no chance. No, that was a call. I can only translate from Hausa to English, but I cannot
Mm,
write poetry. I can write in Hausa quite all right, but not poetry. Yes,
poetry.
no, not
Okay.
poetry, unfortunately.
All right, then. We have our answer. What about fiction, short stories?
I have a few short stories, very few that were published. One in Hausa, about three
Okay.
or four in English. Yes,
Mm.
that's my very poor short story, right? And that's why I've stopped trying my hand on it.
Right. Thank you. And this other question is a bit lengthy. Let me read it out for you.
Okay.
I have always insisted that a poem must have a purpose or intended meaning clearly conceptualized before its eventual emergence. The reader can project his own meanings in addition to the writer's intended meaning. We have had
Mm.
this argument over and over again. How do you develop a poem devoid of primary meaning and leave it to the reader to project his own meaning? How possible is this? I thought the vision precedes the realization.
It's always possible. It's the readers that make the meaning, not
The
the
reader.
author.
Mm,
Yeah, it's very basic. If you are reading one of my books, I will not be there to answer
the
questions. I may
question.
be there like at this moment, but
Mhm.
how many times could I be there before the reader whenever they pick up my book to read? So
Yeah.
basically, the reader is the king. The reader is the meaning maker, not ultimately the writer. Because
Mhm.
yes, the writer is the initial sign, symbol, graphological maker. But in the
Mhm.
end, who is there to interpret it? Is the reader. You may conceive your poem, you may write it in a particular way with a particular sleight of hand, but in the end, it's the reader who will read against such sleight of hand.
Mhm.
Um, I've always given the example of the late Hausa dramatist Bashar Faruk Rukuba, who wrote the famous Matar Mutum Kabarinsa.
Kabarinsa. Mm.
Uh, he was a very cantankerous person, very argumentative. Before the end of
Mm.
his life, he, whenever he had the opportunity, he used to berate Hausa scholars that they have never understood his intention of
Mm.
writing the play. He thought he was the only person qualified to interpret
His work.
his work. But
Mm.
that's not how literature works.
Right.
You may have your intention, and you can never be sure that what you have written comes out as you intended it to be,
Mm.
even you as a writer in the first place.
Writer.
Even if it is possible that you could impose your intention on your writing, you are not sure, and it's not
Mhm.
peaceable. Neither is it desirable that the
Mm.
reader should always follow or toe your own line. The reader should be independent to form their opinion,
Of
to
your
have
work.
insight and their inputs into your work,
Mm.
independent of whether they are right or wrong. That's why we say in criticism in literature, there are no right and wrong answers. There are only tenable or untenable um, positions. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There are no right or wrong answers. We only talk about plausibility, that your reading of my poem as this or that could be plausible. All right. But your reading could never be right or wrong. All right. Because
Mm-hmm.
that reading is only one out of possible millions other readings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that answer. And I hope it answers your question as well. Let me see who asked. Mr. Suleiman Zailani. All right.
Okay.
So let us end with any golden advice you have for poets, for people who want to publish their own collections, emerging poets, anyone really.
They should read much more than they write. This is it's cliched, but it's true. They should
Mm.
read. The problem with most poets today, especially poets coming out of their salad day, amateur poets, young poets coming into their own, that they are in a haste to publish. They are in a hurry to bring out a
Mm.
collection, even when they do not even understand the medium they are writing in. All right, maybe because poetry now is fashionable, it's a fashion part. Performance poet, everybody like Nasiba and Sumaya Al Mansur used to say, performance poet is not for everyone. Likewise, the non-performative poetry is not for
It's not.
everyone. Yeah, you should try and develop yourself. Read, and don't be in a hurry to bring out a collection. There are books that I have seen that they are totally a waste of space. They are totally a waste
Mm.
of time. Not because the writers do not have anything to say or they are not good, but because they just compel themselves literally to bring out a book even when they are not ready. So don't be
Ready.
compelled. Don't
Mm.
don't succumb to peer pressure that maybe because someone in your cycle has published that you must move heaven and earth to also get
Mm.
published. You should uh, along, tarry a little, try to develop our voice, our craft, know something about what you are writing, and then the opportunity, if the writing is any better, opportunity will present itself. It took me
Mm.
long time to publish my first book. So many people have berated me, literally. So many
Mm.
friends that I was looking for opportunity to publish abroad. Even those who suggested that I have the means and capability to pay for my own books to be printed, I said no. If the work is any better, I will wait to be published. I've never paid to be published as far as creative writing is
That's
concerned. This
nice.
is my own
Mm.
philosophy. I'm not saying that this should work for all of us.
Everyone.
At least try to develop your craft, your voice, have grief on what you are doing before you
Mm.
attempt um,
Mm.
to publish, and try to get people that will give you an honest opinion about your work. Most of this time we rely on our friends, on our cycle,
Mm.
for once we get endorsement from our Facebook or Instagram posts and likes, or we get words of encouragement from our friends, we think we have made it. Most of the
Mm.
time, your friends are not going to give you honest opinion about your work, especially when they are not literary people. Maybe you
Yeah.
have friends, you give them their writing. They are not poets themselves. They will praise to high heavens whatever you have written. So get
Mm.
someone or some
You
people who will give
understand.
honest criticism, even if it means paying to have your work critique, to have feedback
Mm.
on your work. Belong to writers group where there are honest opinion. Most of the time, this writers group, um, they are just platform where you are allowed to just post every rubbish thing you compose. Nobody is going to give you any feedback, and sometimes if you are given the feedback, people get angry. So develop thick skin. Um, don't be averse to criticism.
Mm.
This thing will help not just for beginner writers, even for established writers as well.
Mhm. Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. Is there anything else you would like to add? Anything I did not ask you that you would like to talk about?
That I like paintings. That most of these poems were either directly written in response to paintings,
Oh.
or inspired by paintings, or they were interpretation of paintings. If there is any skill, if reincarnation is true, if we are going to come back in another life, I will want to come as a painter. Yeah, I
Ah.
will want to come yes, I will want to come as a painter. I like painting and music.
Mm.
Most of the time, these poems were inspired by music, not popular music, classical music. I'm a bit of an aficionado of art. I want to be art historian and music critic. Though I've never written any music critic myself. But I have friends who are music critics. Daimi Ajayi
Mhm.
is a very good music critic, Nigerian
Critic.
music. So I try to explore behind the thing, um, poetry, painting, and music in my poetry. It's not
Mm.
so apparent. Only those who know me closely know this. Yeah.
Understand. That's beautiful. That's a really nice thing. I love paintings as well. All
Oh,
right.
great, great.
Thank you so much, sir. This is a very insightful conversation. We're honored that you made the time and taught us this
Thank
much.
you. It's a
Thank you.
pleasure anytime for Poetic Wednesday. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. So have a
Thank you.
nice day.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye bye.